I'm Isla Thompson, 34 years old, sitting quietly at my younger sister Olivia's Air Force promotion ceremony. Today, I chose to wear civilian clothes instead of my uniform. For years, my family has told everyone I washed out of the military that I failed. What they don't know is the truth about my actual rank or everything I've accomplished. I've kept that to myself, for reasons I still don't fully understand. But everything changed when the base commander recognized me. What happened next altered everything between us forever. Before I take you further into this story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you want to hear how I finally proved my entire family wrong after all these years. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, where everyone knew everyone and, more importantly, they knew us. The Thompsons carried a proud military legacy that went back generations. My father retired as an Army colonel after 27 years of service. My grandfather served into wars as a Navy captain. My older brother Ethan followed suit, joining the Marines and working his way up to major. The Thompson name carried weight in military circles. But that weight, it was only meant for the men in our family. Roles were set in stone. Men served and protected, and women stayed home, raised kids, and carried on the legacy through their sons. That's just how things were, according to my father. I can still hear him say it during family dinners. Thompson men fight, Thompson women support. That's how we've lasted. But I never fit into that mold. From a very young age, I was drawn to military strategy and leadership. While other girls my age played with dolls, I was buried in books about battles and innovations in warfare. My father's study was packed with military history and tactical guides, and whenever he wasn't home, I'd sneak in and lose myself in them for hours. I remember one afternoon when I was 10, Dad caught me in his study. He didn't encourage me. He just laughed and said, "That's cute, Isla. But those are serious books for serious men. Why don't you go help your mom in the kitchen?" That moment should have crushed my spirit, but instead, it sparked something deep inside me, a quiet fire. I stopped talking about my interests at home, but I never stopped chasing them. By the time I was in high school, I had joined DROTC, kept my grades at the top, and earned leadership roles in every club I could. My teachers saw something in me. My guidance counselor told me to aim high. But at home, my successes were always brushed aside, overshadowed by Ethan's military accolades or Olivia's more traditional achievements. The real heartbreak came in senior year. I had poured everything into my West Point application: late nights, extra training runs, hours of military reading, perfect grades. And when my acceptance letter came, I was over the moon. This was it, my moment. That night at dinner, I shared the news, expecting just this once, my father to be proud. But he set down his fork and looked at me with something worse than anger, disappointment. "West Point, you, Isla, you won't last a week in basic training. The military isn't for girls like you. It'll chew you up and spit you out." My mom reached for my hand across the table and said, "Sweetheart, why would you want that? You're so smart. You could go anywhere, do anything. Why throw away a normal life? Marriage, children. Don't you want that?" Ethan, home on leave, just laughed. "Sis, you can't even handle camping in the backyard. What makes you think you can handle the military?" The only one who didn't speak was Olivia, 2 years younger than me. She sat quietly, her eyes shifting around the table, saying nothing. "I'm going," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I got accepted, and I'm going." My dad shook his head. "You'll be back in a month, and then we'll have to sit through you explaining why you failed for the rest of our lives." That night, I celebrated alone in my room. No cake, no hugs, no family pictures, just me and my acceptance letter. That night, I began to understand that my path would be mine alone. What I didn't know then was that this moment would define the next 15 years of my life. Every success, every step forward met with silence or rejection. Slowly, I stopped sharing anything at all. The summer before I left for West Point was tense. My father barely said a word, treating my decision like a phase I'd soon regret. My mom kept trying to talk me out of it, all while sadly folding my clothes, like I was heading into disaster. Ethan made jokes whenever he called. And Olivia? She kept watching everything. Quietly, the night before I left, my dad said, "There's no shame in knowing something's not for you. When not, if you come back home, we'll take you in. The Thompson name still matters, even if you mess up." I nodded politely, but inside, I made a silent vow. I will never come home defeated. If it comes to that, I won't come home at all. The next morning, instead of driving me to West Point, which was only 4 hours away, they dropped me at the bus station, a trip they didn't want to make. As the bus pulled away, I looked back through the window, watched them grow smaller and smaller. My dad already looked like he was waiting for me to fail. My mom wiped away tears. Ethan checked his watch. And Olivia? She raised her hand slightly, just for a second. Maybe it was a real goodbye, maybe not, but I didn't look back again for a very long time. I watched through the rear window as my family grew smaller and smaller. My father's face already wore the look of expected disappointment. My mother wiped away tears. Ethan glanced down at his watch. And Olivia, for just a brief second, raised her hand in what might have been a sincere gesture of support. It was the last time I allowed myself to look back for a very long time. West Point hit me like a truck. Despite all my preparation, nothing could have truly braced me for the intensity of those first few days. The yelling, the rigid discipline, the non-stop physical strain. It was everything my father had warned me about, and worse. That first night, lying in bed after one of the most brutal days of my life, I questioned everything. My muscles ached, my mind was overloaded, and the other cadets around me seemed sharper, faster, more confident. I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. I started writing letters home in those early weeks, not because I needed emotional support, but because I wanted to prove I was still standing, still fighting. The responses were rare and short. My mom's notes were mostly filled with local gossip, gently suggesting I could still change my mind. My father never replied at all, but something changed amidst the chaos. I began to find my footing, my strength, and most importantly, I found people who saw me, really saw me, for who I was. Diana Lewis became my first real friend at the academy. Unlike my family, she never questioned if I belonged. When I nailed a difficult training drill or aced an exam, her congratulations were heartfelt. When I struggled, she had my back every time. "You're going to make one hell of an officer, Thompson," she told me one evening as we sat polishing our boots. "I'd follow you into battle any day." A simple sentence, but after years of being dismissed, it felt revolutionary. Then came the injury that nearly ended everything. During a second-year training exercise, I badly broke my leg. Surgery followed, then months of recovery. I was stuck in the medical unit, watching my classmates push forward while I fell behind. Doctors worried I might not recover in time. Whispers of a medical discharge started circulating. "There's no shame in knowing your limits," they said. Words that echoed my father's predictions so closely, they haunted me. Just when I was on the verge of giving up, Captain Rebecca Mitchell entered my life. A decorated officer overseeing cadet training, she paid me a surprise visit. "I've been following your progress, Cadet Thompson," she said, sitting beside my bed. "Before your injury, you were on track to graduate in the top 5% of your class." I looked away. "Doesn't matter much now, does it, ma'am?" "It absolutely matters," she replied firmly, "because it tells me what you're capable of. This injury, it's just another problem to solve. And from what I've seen, you solve problems better than anyone." She kept visiting throughout my recovery, bringing me tactical challenges and leadership scenarios to work through. When I started physical therapy, she arranged for extra sessions. When I doubted myself, she pushed harder. "The military doesn't need more soldiers who've never faced adversity," she said once. "It needs leaders who know how to get through it." With her mentorship and my own sheer stubbornness, I didn't just recover, I thrived. By graduation, I had earned my spot in the top 5%, just like Captain Mitchell predicted. My family came to the commissioning ceremony, but only out of obligation. They clapped politely when I crossed the stage, no cheers, no proud smiles. At the reception, my father shook my hand like he was greeting a stranger. "Well, you proved me wrong about making it through," he said. "But the real military's different from school. That's where we'll really see." My first assignment brought something I'd never felt before: purpose, real responsibility. This wasn't training anymore, these were real decisions, real consequences. And I loved it. I thrived under the structure, the chain of command, the constant need to adapt and solve. My commanding officers noticed. My performance reviews praised my leadership, my creativity, my knack for making the impossible work. For the first time, I felt more at home in uniform than I ever had at my actual home. When I was promoted to lieutenant, I called my parents, hoping maybe finally they'd be proud. That's nice, dear, my mother said. But don't you think it's time to start thinking about something more stable? You're not getting any younger. Then my father took the phone. Lieutenant's just the beginning, Isla. Let's see if you make it to captain. Most don't. A week later, Olivia called with big news. She was joining the Air Force the right way, she said. Meaning through officer training school, not an academy. My father was ecstatic. I could hear it through the phone. Now that's a Thompson, he bellowed. Olivia knows how to do things properly. She'll go far, mark my words. That Christmas. The difference was impossible to ignore. Dinner revolved around Olivia's upcoming Air Force career. My father gave advice, named connections, swapped stories from his own days in service. When I tried to share something about my own work, he cut me off with a smirk. Isla's just playing soldier between filing paperwork, he told the extended family, waving his hand dismissively. But Olivia, she's keeping the real Thompson tradition alive. Something broke inside me that night. Later, when my father cornered me to explain again why I wouldn't last long in the military, I made a decision. You're right, I told him. My path is different. So from now on, I won't bore you with the details. He smiled, thinking I had admitted he was right, but I hadn't. What I had done was draw a line. From that day forward, I stopped sharing anything about my military career with my family. No more updates, no more stories. If they asked, I gave vague replies, the usual, just office stuff. Eventually, they stopped asking. What they didn't know couldn't be belittled. What they couldn't see, they couldn't tear down. That silence became my armor, and behind it, I soared. While they assumed I was buried in a boring desk job, my career was accelerating faster than ever. My reputation for creative solutions and steady leadership spread, and soon senior officers were requesting me for more complex roles. At T-28, I was selected for a highly competitive position in Special Operations Command, a role that required top-tier security clearance and placed me in the heart of the military's most sensitive missions. The selection process had a failure rate of over 70%. When I found out I'd been accepted, I opened a single bottle of champagne in my apartment and toasted alone. There was no one I could call, no one who would understand what this moment meant. During this assignment, I met Ryan, an intelligence officer whose sharp mind matched my own. Our relationship grew slowly, built on shared trust and experience. A connection only another military mind could really understand. When we married in a small on-base ceremony, my family came, but clearly out of duty, not joy. They looked out of place around my colleagues. What does your husband do exactly? My mother whispered during the reception. And you? You've been so secretive. We both work in military intelligence, I said truthfully but vaguely. That's really all I can say. My father didn't see that as confidentiality, he saw it as shame. He pulled Ryan aside later. Isla was always stubborn about the military, he said. Couldn't admit it wasn't for her. Good, she found someone who understands the system better than she does. Ryan stayed polite, but he was confused. That night, as we packed for our honeymoon, he finally asked what had been bothering him all day. Why do they talk about you like you failed? He asked. Your dad spoke to me like I'm helping you limp through a job you can't handle. I sighed and told him the whole story. It's easier this way, I said. They built a version of me they're comfortable with. Trying to correct it just leads to arguments. So I let them believe what they want. I've learned that trying to correct their version of me only leads to conflict, I told Ryan. So, I let them believe what they want. But you're one of the most respected officers in your division, Ryan argued, frustrated. Your work has literally saved lives. How do they not know who you really are? Because they've never wanted to, I replied simply. As my security clearance increased, so did the valid reasons to keep my work private. And my rapid rise through the ranks continued, fueled by successful missions that earned me commendations I couldn't display and recognition I couldn't share outside of classified circles. Meanwhile, the story my family told about me began to shift. I wasn't just a military washout anymore. Now, I supposedly had mental health issues. An easy explanation for my secrecy and refusal to talk about work. That narrative spread like wildfire through family gatherings and our small hometown. I overheard my aunt once whisper to a cousin, "Poor Isla, that whole military experiment didn't work out." Now she's too proud to admit it. Mary says she has anxiety now, the cousin responded. Can't even talk about what she does. My mother never corrected them. Instead, She fed the assumptions with sympathetic expressions and vague comments about supporting Isla through her challenges. And she kept trying to fix what she saw as my real problem, my focus on career instead of family. I met the sweetest young man at church, became her go-to line during our rare phone calls even though I was already married to Ryan. He's leaving the service to start a business. Much more stable, good for raising children. While my family wove fiction around my life, Olivia continued along her traditional military path. She earned steady promotions and typical assignments, and every one of her milestones became the centerpiece of family celebrations. Every holiday, I'd hear updates like, Olivia just finished leadership training, always followed by a quick look in my direction, then a change of subject. Olivia's been selected for the leadership training program, my father announced proudly one Thanksgiving, following in my footsteps just like a Thompson should. Then, turning to me, he added in a softer tone that he probably thought was kindness, not everyone's meant for advancement, Isla. There's no shame in a support role. Under the table, Ryan squeezed my hand. I forced a smile, knowing full well that just a few weeks earlier, I had personally designed the strategic structure for that very leadership program. After that holiday, Ryan and I made the hard decision to limit family contact to major events only. The constant dismissal was wearing us down, following us home like a cloud we couldn't shake. I hate seeing them underestimate you, Ryan told me one night. I want to just tell them who you really are. I appreciated his loyalty, but I knew the truth. They wouldn't believe you. I told him. They'd just think you're trying to spare my feelings. Then came the mission that changed everything. It was a classified operation, one that required coordination across multiple military branches. The planning was intense, the execution, flawless. The success so significant, it earned private commendation from high-ranking leadership. Nothing could be shared publicly, but afterward, I was approached with an offer to enter a specialized leadership track, one that would fast-track me to become one of the youngest female generals in our branch's history. The selection was based on years of data, my performance, field leadership, strategic decisions, and peer evaluations. When the promotion finally came through, the ceremony was small and quiet, due to the nature of my work. Only Ryan and a few colleagues with clearance attended. As the stars were pinned to my uniform, I felt an overwhelming mix of pride and sadness. Pride in the achievement, sadness that the people who raised me would never know what I'd become. That night, Ryan and I celebrated at home, takeout on the coffee table, a champagne toast between us. To General Thompson, he said, raising his glass, the world's best kept secret. I smiled, but the familiar ache of family estrangement lingered. Sometimes I wonder, I admitted, if things would have been different if I'd tried harder to make them see me. Ryan thought for a moment. Maybe, he said, but at what cost? Would you have made the same choices, taken the same risks, followed the same path if you'd been focused on earning their approval? His question stayed with me long after that night. Had the distance from my family actually helped me succeed? Had their doubt freed me to define success on my own terms? I was still wrestling with those thoughts when Olivia's promotion ceremony invitation arrived. She was being promoted to major, well-earned accomplishment. Despite everything between us, she was still my sister. And after careful thought, I decided to go. I never expected that one simple choice would bring both of my worlds crashing together so publicly. The invitation sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days before I committed. My first instinct was to decline, maybe send a card, avoid another event where I'd be the outcast, but something kept me from throwing it away. Maybe a final thread of hope that things could still change. You don't have to go, Ryan said gently as he caught me staring at the envelope again. No one would blame you for staying home. She's still my sister, I said softly. That has to mean something. If you go, Ryan asked, will you wear your uniform? His question made me pause. My uniform with its stars and ribbons would reveal everything. No hiding, no avoiding. It would force a confrontation I wasn't sure I wanted. No, I decided. This is Olivia's day. I'm not going to turn it into a spectacle. Ryan nodded, though I could tell he didn't agree. I have meetings I can't move, he said, but if you need support later, I can try to join you. I'll be fine, I said more confidently than I felt. Just a couple of hours, the morning of the ceremony, I got dressed carefully. A conservative blue dress, nothing flashy, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a neat bun. Professional, civilian, Invisible.as. I drove to the Air Force Base. I rehearsed my answers, ready for the usual digs, the backhanded compliments, the dismissal that had become so familiar. I arrived early, hoping to slip inside unnoticed, but my mother spotted me in the parking lot. "Isla, over here," she called out like we were best friends. My father and Ethan stood beside her, both in civilian clothes, but standing tall like their military pride was stitched into their posture. "You made it," my father said, clearly surprised. "Good of you to show up for your sister. I wouldn't miss it," I replied evenly. As we walked toward the hall, my mother linked her arm through mine. It felt more like control than affection. "You look nice, dear," she said, "though a bit thin. Are you eating well? And your hair, remember how lovely it was when you wore it down?" Before I could answer, a group of uniformed Air Force officers approached. My father instantly straightened, slipping back into his Colonel persona. "Colonel Thompson," one of the officers greeted him. "It's an honor to meet you. Your daughter Olivia speaks very highly of your service." "The honor's mine," my father replied, shaking hands proudly. "The Thompson military legacy is alive and well with Olivia." He placed a hand on my shoulder and added, "This is our other daughter, Isla. She gave the military a try once, too, but it wasn't really a fit." The officers offered polite nods, their interest visibly fading. "She's got a government desk job now," my mother added in a hushed voice. "We don't ask too much about it. She gets anxious when it comes up." I felt my cheeks burn, but I stayed calm. This was familiar. Just another version of the same story. Inside the hall, more introductions followed, and each came with a new version of my so-called failure. Ethan even threw in some flair, recalling to a group of Marines how I once cried during a war movie. "Should've known then," he joked. Playing soldier wasn't going to work out for her. Olivia stayed quiet through it all. Our eyes met once, and she gave me a small, apologetic smile, but she didn't speak up. Her silence, after all these years, felt like agreement. By the time we took our seats, my jaw ached from holding a fake smile. The years of belittlement had settled on my shoulders like a weighted blanket. I considered slipping out, faking a work emergency to spare myself 2 more hours of this, but then I stopped. I thought about my father's endless doubts, my mother's suggestions to quit, Ethan's jokes, Olivia's silence. I thought about every mission I'd led, every strategy that had saved lives, the officers who now looked to me for leadership. None of it mattered in this room. In their eyes, I was still Isla, the girl who failed. My hand moved toward my purse, and then I stopped. Leaving now would only prove them right. Staying, sitting through this with dignity, that would be my strength. Even if they never saw it. I sat up straighter as the ceremony began, reminding myself why I came, to honor my sister. No matter our history, she had worked for this moment. She deserved to be celebrated. The hall filled with uniforms and family members. The colors were posted. The national anthem played. I stood with quiet pride, my military bearing hard to hide, even in civilian clothes, and as I braced for the next hour of polite smiles and quiet pain, I had no idea that my carefully protected world was about to be shattered, completely. I kept my expression composed, breathing steadily, avoiding eye contact with my family. Then came the announcement that Colonel James Harrison, the base commander, would be leading the promotion ceremony. My heart skipped a beat. Harrison. I knew that name. Just a few months earlier, we had worked together on a joint classified operation, a mission that required high-level coordination between branches. During that mission, Colonel Harrison had reported directly to me. As he walked to the podium, I subtly shifted my body to the side and lowered my gaze. Maybe he wouldn't notice me among the crowd in civilian clothes. Maybe military decorum would stop him from acknowledging me. Even if he did recognize me, his speech started off as expected, acknowledging the promotions, the hard work, the significance of the day. I began to relax, thinking maybe I'd escape this unnoticed. "Military service is a proud tradition," Colonel Harrison said, his eyes scanning the audience, "one that extends beyond the individual to honor the families who support them." His gaze landed on my section. He paused. Even from across the room, I could see the flicker of confusion, then recognition. A tiny break in his words gave it away, but he pressed on, maintaining professionalism. I held my face still, neutral, calm, hoping against all hope that he would stick to protocol and not draw attention to me. The rest of his speech became a blur as my mind spiraled with the very real Possibility that my carefully separated worlds were about to collide. After the formal promotions ended, Olivia stood in uniform, proudly receiving congratulations from officers and friends. My family gathered around her, basking in her moment. I stood off to the side, smiling supportively when she glanced at me, but staying distant from the formalities. I was just planning my quiet exit when I saw Colonel Harrison making his way through the crowd directly toward me. His steps were purposeful, his eyes fixed. There was no mistaking his intent. I straightened automatically, instinctively returning to military posture. Even in civilian clothes, he stopped in front of me, surprise still faintly visible beneath his formal expression. Then, loud enough for those nearby including my family to hear, he spoke with unmistakable respect. "Ma'am, you're the general? General Thompson?" The conversations around us stopped. My father, mid-sentence recounting Olivia's determination. As a child, slowly turned. "I apologize for the informal setting, General," Colonel Harrison said, either unaware of or unbothered by the tension thickening in the air. "I didn't expect to see you here. Your work on Operation Northern Compass was extraordinary. We're still implementing your framework across multiple installations." The silence around us was immediate and heavy. I could feel the confusion radiating from my family like heat. "Thank you, Colonel Harrison," I replied evenly. "It was a team effort. Today is Major Thompson's day, my sisters. I'm here as family, not in any official capacity." His eyes widened slightly. In surprise. "Your sister? I had no idea." "That's incredible. Two Thompsons serving with such distinction. Your family must be extremely proud." Before I could say anything more, my father stepped forward, his expression a knot of disbelief and confusion. "There must be some mistake," he said stiffly. "My daughter Isla works in an administrative position. She's not no mistake." "Sir," Colonel Harrison interrupted, his tone still respectful but firm. "General Thompson is one of our most highly regarded strategic leaders. Her work is mostly classified, but within military leadership, her name is well known. Legendary, actually." Other officers had begun gathering around us, drawn by the unusual interaction. One Air Force major approached, his eyes lighting with recognition. "General Thompson? The Isla Thompson who created the Integrated Response Protocol. Ma'am, it's an honor. We just completed training on your system last month." Another officer joined in, adding, "General, your keynote at the Joint Chiefs Strategic Summit completely changed our approach to multi-branch coordination." More military personnel crowded in, offering respectful nods and comments of praise. And my family? Frozen. My father's face had lost all color. My mother stood with her hand pressed against her mouth. Ethan looked stunned, jaw slack. And Olivia? Her face showed the most emotion of all, surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like betrayal. Now fully aware of the awkwardness, Colonel Harrison attempted a graceful exit. "I'm sorry for interrupting your family moment, General. Perhaps we can schedule time next week to talk about expanding the training initiative." "Of course, Colonel. My office will be in touch," I replied, with a respectful nod. He stepped away, and most of the officers followed. The silence that followed was absolute. My father was the first to speak, his voice tight. "What exactly is going on here, Isla?" I met his gaze without flinching. "Maybe we should talk in private." "Yes." My mother jumped in, trying to regain composure. "Let's find somewhere quiet." We moved as a group into a small unused conference room beside the main hall. As soon as the door shut behind us, the questions erupted. "General," my father barked, "what kind of stunt is this? When did this happen? Why would you hide something like this from us?" My mother asked, still stunned. "There's no way," Ethan muttered, shaking his head. "There's absolutely no way you outrank all of us. This has to be a mistake." Olivia remained quiet, watching me closely, her expression unreadable. For a brief second, I considered slipping back into the old routine, downplaying, sidestepping, avoiding the truth. But then I looked around the room. The faces of the people who had spent years not believing in me. "It was time." "No mistake," I said, calmly but firmly. "I'm a general. Have been for over a year. Before that, I held ranks I never mentioned. Because I learned early on that nothing I achieved would ever be seen as valid in this family." The silence stretched. They were stunned. "But how?" my mother asked softly. "How could we not know?" "Because you didn't want to," I said plainly. "It was easier to believe I failed than to reconsider your assumptions about who I could become." My father stepped closer, anger overtaking his confusion. His voice dropped, sharp. So all this time, you were just, what? Laughing at us? Playing some elaborate game while we thought you were struggling? No. I cut in. I wasn't laughing. I was protecting myself from exactly this, your disbelief, your need to question everything, your immediate assumption that I must be exaggerating or mistaken, that there must be something wrong with my success. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she stepped beside him. But we're your family, Isla. How could you keep something this big from us? All those holidays, all those dinners. Were you just pretending the whole time? I softened slightly at the pain in her voice. I wasn't pretending, Mom. I was compartmentalizing. After so many years of having every win questioned, dismissed, or ignored, I stopped sharing that part of my life. But, General, Ethan interrupted, still trying to process it. That's not just a promotion, that's huge. That's historic. Yes, I said, nodding. I'm one of the youngest women in our branch's history to reach this rank. My work is mostly in strategic operations and intelligence, most of it classified. The accelerated promotion track I was placed on is reserved for only the most exceptional cases. And you didn't think to tell us? My father snapped, his voice rising again. Not once? Not in all these years? I took a breath, my voice low but steady. When exactly should I have told you, Dad? When you told the Sullivans at Christmas that I couldn't handle the real military? When you explained to Grandpa that I had settled into a nice desk job? Or maybe when you introduced me to your old army friends as your daughter who tried the military but just wasn't Thompson material? Each example hit like a punch. My father took an involuntary step back. I never said, he began. We all did, Olivia said, quietly interrupting him. All eyes turned to her. Standing in her crisp, major's uniform, her voice finally broke the silence she had maintained for so long. We all did, she repeated. Or we stood by and let it happen. She looked at me, her expression filled with regret. We created a story about Isla, and we never questioned it, even when things didn't quite add up, even when she stopped talking about work completely. We just fit that into our narrative too. Her words hit deeper than any of theirs had. Olivia had never stood up for me, not once. And now, hearing her say all this out loud, it stirred something I hadn't expected. That should have been a massive red flag, but we just folded it into the version of you we already believed, Olivia said, her honesty pierced through me. After years of silence, hearing her finally acknowledge the family dynamic so openly hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. My mother dropped into a nearby chair, her usual composure slipping as the full weight of it all settled in. All this time, we've been telling everyone you couldn't handle military life, she whispered. We've been feeling sorry for you. Isla. Oh God, what have we done? My father stayed standing, posture rigid, his military bearings still intact even as his entire worldview visibly shifted. You should have told us, he said, though his voice lacked the conviction it usually carried. Regardless of how we acted, you should have set the record straight. I tried, I replied, my voice steady. After my first promotion, after I was selected for special operations, after I received multiple commendations, but every time, my achievements were questioned, minimized, or attributed to diversity quotas or connections, never to my capability. Eventually, I stopped trying. Ethan, ever the analyst, tried to shift to logic. But how did you even keep this hidden? Promotions are public. There are ceremonies, news. Most of my work is classified, I explained. That limits what can be shared publicly. My promotion ceremony was small and private. And as for public records, did any of you ever actually check, look me up, ask me directly about my rank? Or did you just assume your silence was confirmation? Before the conversation could go further, there was a knock at the door. Ryan walked in, his face a mixture of concern and relief when he saw me. He came over and placed a reassuring hand on my back. Sorry I'm late, he said. Meeting went long. Did I miss anything important? The timing of his question was so unintentionally perfect that it almost made us laugh. Even Olivia let out a startled chuckle before covering her mouth. You could say that, I replied with a wry smile. My family just found out I'm not actually a military failure. Ryan glanced around the room, reading the atmosphere instantly. He said. So the truth finally comes out. He turned to my father and extended a hand. General Thompson is one of the most respected strategic minds in the service, sir. Those of us who've worked with her consider it a privilege. My father took Ryan's hand, automatically military custom overriding emotion. Before he could respond, another knock interrupted. Colonel Harrison appeared in the doorway. "Excuse the intrusion, General Thompson," he said formally. "I apologize, but there's an urgent matter that needs your attention." It couldn't have been more perfectly timed or more awkward. Here was irrefutable proof of who I was, arriving just as my family was trying to process that exact reality. "Of course, Colonel," I said, turning to my family. "I have to take this. But this conversation isn't over." "No," my father replied, his voice quieter, more measured. "It certainly isn't." As I left the room, Ryan stayed behind. "I'll wait here," he said gently. "I'll answer anything I can." The urgent matter turned out to be a minor issue about training protocol, something that could have easily waited. But I welcomed the break. It gave me space to breathe, to gather my thoughts. Standing alone in the hallway, I heard Ryan's voice floating through the door. "She never wanted to embarrass any of you," he was saying. "That's why she never corrected the record publicly. But while you were telling people she failed, she was being commended for operations that saved American lives." My father must have replied, but his voice was too soft for me to catch. Ryan's response wasn't, "With all due respect, sir, what you can't believe doesn't change what's true. Your daughter is exceptional at what she does. Everyone who's served with her knows that. The only people who didn't are sitting in this room." I took a deep breath and stepped back inside. The energy had shifted. Still tense, yes, but for the first time, I felt something else under the surface. Possibility. My father turned to me. He looked different now, not smaller but more human. "I think we need to start this conversation over," he said. "There's clearly a lot I don't know about my daughter." 1 week after Olivia's promotion ceremony, Ryan and I were invited to my parents' house for dinner. It was the first family meal we'd had in years that wasn't tied to a holiday or obligation. The invitation came from my father over the phone, not through my mother, as it always had in the past. That small shift alone spoke volumes. When we arrived, the air was thick with anticipation, tense and certain. But there was a different kind of hope mixed in this time. My mother greeted us at the door with more warmth than I'd expected. "Isla, Ryan, thank you for coming," she said, hugging me gently. "Please, come in." My father was already standing in the living room. As we entered, he stood straighter, a military courtesy I had never once received from him inside that house. Ethan and Olivia were already at the table, their faces full of curiosity and quiet restraint. Dinner began slowly. Safe small talk about traffic, the weather. Everyone seemed to avoid the obvious, until my father put down his fork and looked at me directly. "I've done a lot of thinking this past week," he began. His voice was calm, but it didn't carry the command it used to. "And I owe you an apology." "Several, actually." I said, nothing, caught off guard. "I made assumptions about your ability. I dismissed your accomplishments without ever really seeing them. I built a narrative about your service that was completely wrong." He paused, struggling for the next words. "It's not easy to admit I was wrong, especially not about something so foundational. But I was wrong about you, Isla. Completely." My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "We all were," she added gently. "When Colonel Harrison called you general, I thought it had to be a mistake. But when Ryan explained everything you've done, everything you've earned, I kept thinking, how did we not know?" "Because I stopped telling you," I said softly. "After years of having every milestone dismissed, I gave up on sharing." "That's on us," Ethan admitted. "We made it impossible for you to talk about your success. That's not what family is supposed to be." Olivia looked at me earnestly. "I knew something didn't line up," she said. "The way you carried yourself, the things you said. I just never questioned the version of you the family told me to believe." "I'm sorry, Isla. I should have been a better sister." Their words meant something, but I knew change wouldn't happen overnight. "I appreciate all of this," I said carefully. "But this won't be fixed with one dinner. There are years of patterns we need to undo." "You're right," my father agreed. "This is just the beginning. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to actually get to know the daughter I never saw clearly." "I'd like that," I said. "But it has to be different. I need to know that what I say won't be brushed aside." My mother nodded. "What can we do to show you we mean it?" "For starters," I said, "you can ask real questions about my work, what I can share without assuming it doesn't matter. You can acknowledge that my path, while different from yours, is still valuable." My father nodded. "That sounds fair. the conversation slowly shifted. They asked thoughtful questions about my leadership style, my decisions, what it's like to carry the weight I do. And for the first time in my life, I felt heard, not judged, not dismissed. Heard. The healing wasn't perfect, but it was real. Over the next few months, my mother stopped offering career suggestions and started asking about my current work. Ethan adjusted to the reality of our reversed military ranks and eventually expressed genuine pride. Olivia and I grew closer, bonded through shared experience and perspective. My father changed the most. Everything he believed about gender roles in service had been cracked wide open. It wasn't easy for him, but he faced it, slowly replacing his assumptions with understanding. 6 months later, I was publicly recognized for a strategic initiative that reshaped inter-branch operations. A rare ceremony, one that didn't require classification clearance. I sent my family an invitation more out of inclusion than expectation. I didn't think they'd come, but when I stepped on stage, there they were, all of them, sitting in the audience dressed formally, watching attentively. I faltered for just a second. My father sat upright, eyes filled with something unmistakable, pride. My mother dabbed at tears. Ethan and Olivia, in uniform, stood at respectful attention. After the ceremony, during photos, my father approached me. He looked at me in my full dress uniform, stars on my shoulders, medals on my chest, and said, quietly, I was wrong about you, about a lot of things, but I'm learning. Then formally, he extended his hand. Congratulations, General Thompson. Your service honors this family. The words I had once ached to hear now brought a mix of emotions, validation, yes, but also a deep awareness that I no longer needed his approval to feel worthy. Thank you, Dad, I said, shaking his hand, then pulling him into a brief hug. It means something, but just so you know, I would have done all of this even if you never saw it. I had to define success for myself. He nodded slowly. And maybe that's what makes you such a strong leader. Our family continued to grow from that moment. There were still stumbles, but we finally had the awareness and the willingness to address them, and I realized something important. This journey was never about proving my family wrong. It was about the freedom to be fully myself. To rise without needing permission, to pursue excellence without waiting for applause. Their recognition, when it came, was meaningful, but the real victory? That happened in the quiet moments when I chose to believe in myself despite every voice that said I should. End single quotes T.So here's the question I'll leave you with. When others place limits on what you're capable of, do you fight to prove them wrong? Or do you rise so high that their opinion stops mattering? Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't convincing others of your worth, it's building a life so true to who you are that no one's validation is required. Thanks for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, leave a comment and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, your most important recognition will always come from you.